Welcome to the Manor House. William Penn was granted the colony of Pennsylvania by King Charles II in 1681, and today is Charter Day. This is the anniversary of the day William Penn is granted that charter. So he arrives in Pennsylvania for the first time in 1682, years later. He begins construction of the house. His cousin, William Markham, who was living in New Jersey, actually selected the site. He probably chose this site because someone had come over from New Jersey and started to clear some land and had built a small house here. Didn't actually have a charter or any legal title to the land. He just kind of figured, I guess, no one was living here and nobody will mind. So he picked this particular site. William Penn actually, I just learned this a couple of weeks ago, actually paid that man for the land, even though he already owned it. Now, in fact, he owned the entire colony, but William Penn's a big believer in fair business practices, so I guess he figured this was the most simplest, most peaceful way. Give him a few bucks, get him off the land. So he actually lived in that little house while this house is being built. So he would live here for 2 years. Went back to England, try and settle the border dispute with Maryland. He and Lord Baltimore were arguing over where the border was supposed to be. Very common problem in colonial America. And this is a very tumultuous time in British history. There are all sorts of political and social battles going on, and he gets caught in the crossfire. So he ends up stuck back in England for 15 years. That whole time he's trying to get back here to Pennsylvania. Finally, he does return in 1699. By this time, his first wife, Gulielma, had passed away, so he had then married his second wife, Hannah Callowhill, and she came with him in 1699, along with his daughter, Letitia, who was about 18 years old, and their infant son, John, was born here in the colony. So that's basically the family living here in 1700, Hannah and William Penn, Letitia, and John. When the Penn family went back to England in 1701, the whole family goes with him. Bill Jr., from his first marriage, his eldest surviving son, would come here in 1702. And he lived here in the house for about a year or two while he's in Pennsylvania until I believe he eventually goes back to England as well. So curiously, none of Penn's children or grandchildren chose to live here. They were all down in Philadelphia or were back in England. 3 of his sons and 3 of his grandsons lived in Pennsylvania, at least for a while. They just weren't here. Eventually the house fell into ruin because no one was here taking care of it. So the site you're visiting today is a reconstruction of the original. The family owned the property, about 300 acres, until 1805 or so. They sold the land they still had to the Crozier family. So the Croziers first lived in the kitchen house, which was still standing next door, and eventually built a new farmhouse on this site. So that building stood here until the 1920s, when the state was able to acquire 43 acres to create a memorial to William Penn. So the Crozier house was lifted up, moved out of the way. That's the White House with the green shutters. It's off in that direction. They were actually going to knock that building down, and somebody said, hey, wait a minute, it's a good house, and it's a good historic house in its own right, let's save it. Smart idea. So they moved it over there, and then rebuilt the house in its original location. What made it possible to do this is the fact that Penn was in Philadelphia for much of the construction, since he's running the government as well as building his house. So he's writing letters to the workers here telling them what to build, and a lot of those letters have survived. So he specifies, I believe the front facade was to be 60 feet wide. He wanted an 8-foot high front door with 8 panels. He wanted the widest board they could find in the floor, right in front of the front door. Right down to the fact that the stalls in the barn would be 6 feet 7 inches wide, 12 of them. Very particular about what he wanted to build here. And we also have just letters from the workers would write to Penn in England or in Philadelphia, say, oh, we fixed the gutters, or we just bought some new materials, or we finished the paneling for this room. We also have original inventories of the site. People would periodically go make a list of all the possessions in each of the rooms. We have several of those. We have several account books. Hannah Penn was in charge of running the estate. She's managing the money. We have 3 original account books she wrote in this room. So she's buying foodstuffs, clothing, fabrics, tools, whatever they needed. She's buying all of that stuff. Also James Logan, you may have heard me mention him earlier. He lived here for a while, and he was running the estate and managing the finances. So we have some of his accounting books as well. So we had enough information to build a reasonable approximation of what was originally here. The house is furnished with authentic furnishings from the time period. We only have a couple of Penn family items, pardon me. Penn family items in the house. We have some original green tiles you'll see in the fireplaces on this side. We have a chair that was owned by William Penn. I believe it's on display in the visitor center right now. And we have a large serving tray called the Charger, a great big pewter platter, and that's in the great hall, the dining room right now. So the Charger was actually donated, or actually given. Get an extra? Okay, next group of about